Presenting Here I Promised You I Would Be. We turn our attention to the epilogue to the second part of Henry IV as it appears in the First Folio. To understand its importance, we have to look at where it's located. This information will be known to people who've watched some First Folio enigmas solved, but I'm going to go over it again so that people who have not seen that long video will understand what's going on. Watson Cole wrote, "The first edition of Shakespeare is a folio volume composed almost wholly of ternions, which are groupings of 3 sheets, each group consisting of 6 leaves or 12 pages. In a single instance in the body of the work, the Histories, there is a quaternion, a gathering of 4 sheets of 8 leaves or 16 pages. When I read this, I knew that he was instantly alluding to something written by this man, Dr. John Dee. In his book Monas Hieroglyphica, theorem 20 reads, Unde quaternarium hic demonstramus in ternario quiescentem, which roughly translated means, the quaternity is concealed within the ternary. And I have Alexander Waugh and others to thank for drawing our attention to this theorem. As you can see by the triangle, if you join 3 equilateral triangles together by their points, within the center is a 4th hidden triangle. According to the theory, this conceals a profound truth, and any time you have a quaternity within a ternary, it is either revealing a profound truth or concealing one. To understand it better, we have to look again at the catalogue of plays and where exactly the quaternity is located, or quaternion rather, is located. The quaternion begins on page 87 in the second part of Henry IV, where the collation letters are GG. The last section is on page 93 at GG4. Henry V begins on page 69, where the collation letter is H. This is proof that the wrong page number for Henry V was deliberate. Is it any coincidence that Henry V begins on the same page number as theorem 20 does in the Monas Hieroglyphica? In the last page of the quaternion, is the epilogue, which contains a profound truth. Before we get into the body of it, I'm going to look at a single line and do a simple gematria sum. We're going to look at line 11. It reads in part, Here I promised you I would be, and here I commit my body. Notice that he's talking about himself in the first person, and the line number is a doubled number, suggesting a doubling of something. In this case, I believe it's a doubling of the writer's identity. The simple gematria sum of the H and I in here I gives us 8 plus 9 equals 17. Skeptics will ask, why didn't I add the gematria sum for the second uppercase I? I believe it has to do with this. Between the period after lose and the uppercase H in here, and the lowercase t in promised and the lowercase y in you, I detect that the gaps between those characters are slightly larger. I'll enlarge it to let you know exactly what I'm talking about. As you can see, if we move those gaps to the left and to the right respectively, we see that the gaps are just slightly larger than the gaps between the words and the rest of the line. Therefore, I conclude that the gaps mean not only is this important, but we have to add the H and the I together separately. However, if you add up all the gematria values of the letters in the line, we get 40. Therefore, this line cleverly hides another 1740 allusion. Let's look at the words again. What is the writer saying? The first line is what he is going to do. First my fear, then my curtsy, last my speech. He is first going to describe his worry. Next he will curtsy to get a chuckle. Lastly, he will recite a speech. My fear is your displeasure is how he fears he will upset his audience. My curtsy, my duty is his duty to the audience, to at least pay respect to them. And his speech has a specific purpose. His speech is to beg your pardons. But before he gets to the reason why he's asking for forgiveness, he apologizes for not speaking in blank verse with, "If you look for a good speech now, you undo me." He continues by implying he is speaking from the heart as himself, not as a character. He says, "For what I have to say is of mine own making." Mine own making is the key. He is speaking as himself, not in character. He jokes that what he will say will reflect badly on himself, but really knows that it won't. He says, "And what, indeed, I should say, will, I doubt, prove mine own marring." Marring here meaning that he might mar himself by reciting the speech, but he knows he really won't. Next, he describes what he's doing. His purpose is to make a deal, a venture. But to the purpose, and so to the venture. He says he was previously at this present location in a displeasing play. He says, "Be it known to you, as it is very well, I was lately here in the end of a displeasing play." Think about it for a minute. This play was likely acted around 1599 or 1600 or thereabouts. And that means he was at the height of his powers as a writer. So how could the play have been displeasing to them? In a moment, I'm going to explain why this doesn't necessarily mean it's a play. He asks for their indulgence as he promises something better than what he offered before. He says, "To pray your patience for it and promise you a better. I did mean indeed to pay you with this, which if like an ill venture it come out luckily home." He wanted to pay his audience with this, but suggests the play we have just seen. But what does he mean by "if it come unluckily home"? An ill venture is an allusion to something catastrophic from his life. Should this deal go bust, he will break. He says, "I break. I did mean indeed to pay you with this, which if like an ill venture it come unlucky home, I break." He calls the audience his gentle creditors, and you, my gentle creditors, lose. But hasn't he already paid with this play? Not exactly, and here's why. It's located in the last part of the sentence, in the paragraph. Bate me some and I will pay you some, and, as most debtors do, promise you infinitely. He wants an abatement of his real debts to his creditors in the audience. This is like consolidating his debts if you were insolvent or bankrupt. This puts a whole new light on the displeasing play. Now it looks more like a negotiation of his debts which went sour. That is why he fears upsetting his audience, particularly those people to whom he owes money. So much for paragraph 1. On to paragraph 2. Here is where he gets rather cheeky. He says, "If my tongue cannot entreat you to acquit me, will you command me to use my legs? And yet that were but light payment to dance out of your debt, but a good conscience will make any possible satisfaction, and so will I. All the gentlewomen here have forgiven me. If the gentlemen will not, and the gentlemen do not agree with the gentlewoman, which was never seen before in such assembly." It is customary to name the character who recites this simply as a dancer because in it mentions dancing. But this is a clue he cannot dance. He says, "Will you command me to use my legs?" Imagine the performer is standing on the stage with a cane. Now the line is meant ironically. Will you command me to use my legs? Well, of course not. Why would they? In another of what I call a forever clue, in the authorship game, how many words are there in the sentence? And how many letters are there after will to the right-hand margin? And of course it would be light payment, since he could not dance his way out of debt, which I say, is this a metaphor for leaving town? I mean, to dance out of debt, that's possibly the metaphor for leaving town and not paying anybody. But he's honest. He wants to make amends. That is why he says, "But a good conscience will make any possible satisfaction, and so will I." Here is his plea for debt relief. It is the true purpose of this epilogue, and it is the central idea of the paragraph, located right in the center. In another little authorship clue, count the number of characters from word a to will. Don't forget the comma now. And count the number of characters between wills on that same line. This is another one of what I call a forever clue. He puts his male creditors on the spot since he claims all the women have forgiven him his debts to them. He then sets up his cheekiness with this truism. If the gentlemen will not forgive me, then the gentlemen do not agree with the gentlewoman. Notice that the word gentlewoman is misspelled gentlewoman. It is another clue something is going on here, and at the moment I have no clue or idea why he spelt it that way, why the compositor or the speechwriter spelt it that way. There has to be a reason, and I think it might be in either Old English or another language entirely. His final line is full of cheek and light sarcasm, in which he says, "which was never seen before in such an assembly." Of course everybody's seen that sort of thing before. Gentlemen and gentlewomen, noblemen and noblewomen. We're always arguing or bickering about something or other. On to paragraph 3, which is a little bit more complicated than the previous two paragraphs. He continues to make fun of himself by saying, if you be not too much cloyed with fat meat, and I'll get to the reason why. One more, I beseech you. If you be not too much cloyed with fat meat, our humble author will continue the story with Sir John in it, and make you merry with fair Catherine of France, where, for anything I know, Falstaff shall die of a sweat, unless already he be killed with your hard opinions. For Oldcastle died a martyr, and this is not the man. My tongue is weary. When my legs are too, I will bid you good night, and so kneel down before you, but indeed to pray for the Queen. Of course, the real author is far from humble. And this is meant in irony, and it's an example of Iliism in which he refers to himself in the third person. How many lowercase letters and spaces are there before will on this line? It's another authorship clue. And count the number of words from I to will. It's another forever clue. But in this little part of the speech, he says he will go on to write the life of Henry V, either the famous victories of Henry V or the chronicle history of Henry V, which both are part of the Henry trilogy before it became the Henry trilogy. And the word fair in line 3 is a pun on the real author's name, but we are ahead of ourselves. This suggests he has not yet written the sequel to this play, where he says, where, for anything I know, Falstaff shall die of a sweat unless already he be killed with your hard opinions. In other words, if the audience doesn't like what he's done in this play, he's not going to include Falstaff in the next one. But as we know, he does kill him off for Henry V. Notice that in paragraph 3, Falstaff is referred to in 3 different ways in an example of exergasia. And he names drop his play The Merry Wives of Windsor in line 3 with Mary. Of course, people who had seen Merry Wives of Windsor before seeing this play in the audience, and chances are they did, Mary is obviously going to suggest to them Merry Wives of Windsor. And notice too that fair is the 34th word in the paragraph, including those in brackets. What are we to make of this sentence? Or actually part of a sentence. For Oldcastle died a martyr, and this is not the man. Who was this John Oldcastle? He was an English knight who was executed for treason on December 14th, 1417 by Henry V, the subject of the entire trilogy of Henry plays. He was a martyr because he would not renounce his Lollard faith. Why did the playwright have to clarify who he meant by Oldcastle by saying this is not the man? I believe, along with other Oxfordians, this was added to the epilogue so as to not upset a descendant of Oldcastle, Henry Brooke. The question I have is, would a nobleman bother to force a commoner playwright to add this if it was being performed for the public in a place like the Curtain Theatre? It would only make sense if it was done for a court performance in front of the Queen, where there would be people who knew of Brooke's ancestor. And an interesting note, Cobham's daughter Elizabeth Brooke married Robert Cecil, the second son of William Cecil, who was the Queen's most trusted advisor. We can conclude that this play was performed for the Queen and her court at one of her palaces or a noble's estate. Here is evidence to suggest this is the case. To kneel in supplication is to make something serious. To pray at the same time for the Queen, who was probably in attendance, is to force his creditors into solemnizing his request for debt relief. This puts the gentlemen creditors in an even more difficult spot. Were they to deny the actor's request for some sort of relief, they would have been shamed before the Queen, their peers, and their wives. They wouldn't hear the end of it. How many letters are there from the beginning of this line, "My tongue is weary," to "will"? The number represents truth in Christian mystical thought. This is odd, since the actor implies that he will attend an event with his audience after the performance by saying, "When my legs are tired, too." He says, "My tongue is weary. When my legs are too, I will bid you good night." If this was performed for the Queen and her court, there would have been no way for any commoners to attend such a soiree, and particularly in such an informal manner. They would have been servants only. That means if this performer was attending an after-performance banquet, he would have had to have been a nobleman, not a commoner. Who among the nobility was deeply in debt most of his adult life, as he insinuates in the first paragraph? He lost a vast sum in Sir Martin Frobisher's third voyage to North America, which was very much an ill venture. Everybody lost. He brought back tons of worthless pyrite, known as fool's gold. He was made lame in a duel fought near the Second Blackfriars Playhouse. When he was younger, he was known for his dancing, and he was asked to dance for the Duc d'Alençon in the 1580s during the marriage negotiations between the Duke and Queen Elizabeth. And later on in life, he allegedly gained a lot of weight. We combine all of these clues to get one particular noble known for his plays. The clues are made lame in a street fight, was once a dancer, an ill venture, and the numbers 17 and 40. The headpiece ornament above the epilogue also provides two last clues. These are Calais greyhounds, and they bore the arms of only one family. This man's family. Edward de Vere. This is evidence Edward de Vere was Shakespeare. Watch for the secret heart of the First Folio. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.